Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/prorevenge, where people tell us their best story on how they got revenge on someone or something they didn't like. If you're new around here, please do hit subscribe down below so that you never miss out on another video. But for now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy some pro-revenge. Evil stepfather gets what he deserves. When I was 15, my mum started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later, he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built half-pipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my crap cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later, he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there, it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day, he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of it all, because 15-year-old boys should be playing football and baseball, not being a bleep nerd playing with Pokemon cards and reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher, and then in his off time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mum never intervened, and in fact acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money, because the little boy will just spend it on comics and other gay stuff. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I can buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school, because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of a douchebag and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I had done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left, beat me senseless. At that point, I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that he had been trying to talk to my mum into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again, and between having run away several times and the larceny charge, ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple of years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating ending it. Once I left home, I didn't speak to my mum for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager, and had gotten into weightlifting, so he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer, and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him. So she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation, and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months, and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly after they started dating. Oh, and my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house, and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement, have been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal. I put an immediate end to that. He was past the deadline to remove his personal effects, and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection, around $14,000, and his autographed sports memorabilia, roughly $11,000, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, around $6,500 I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, platinum band 3 diamonds, roughly 2 carats, wedding band, his coin collection, I also collect coins, and some tools and other odds and ends. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago, I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving, I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his car out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches missed, and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s, and I no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try and punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator, and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result, he lost his job and pension at the local middle school, and because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault, as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, which caused several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked, and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to, just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line, he attempted to ring up multiple times more than one to overcharge me, and when I called him out on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me back me up, and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him curl up a little bit inside, and it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm just paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money, I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had a rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card." I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday, when he works again, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of the better above ground pulls, and as he's ringing it out, tell him, "I know that my daughter is just going to love this pull. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway." That's literally just eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, or whatever that saying is, because he definitely deserved that. Former nerd destroys bully's life. This is a story about my older sister. My sister is a super kind and smart person. In high school, she was a typical nerd. Never really cared about her clothes really, and stuck to her studies and extracurricular. Her general style was putting her hair in a ponytail, jeans, shirt, and sweater/jacket. In her class, there were a group of popular girls that made it their life job to make my sister's life miserable. Think real-life Mean Girls, Regina George and all. Every time I talked to her about it, I could tell in her eyes it hurt her, but she just told me she was okay, and she'll just keep ignoring them. One day, Regina and her minions spread the rumor about my sister getting around, telling everyone she acts innocent but has actually slept with a bunch of guys and even hit on teachers. This rumor spread to all of the students and the staff. I texted my sister when I heard about it and she told me she was fine, but when I saw her at home later that night, it was obvious she had been crying. The school called my parents about the whole ordeal. The administration knew that it was all BS, but still had to investigate since it involved teachers. My sister and even the administration knew who would spread this kind of rumor, but there was no proof since it was all word of mouth. The teachers knew that those group of girls were not nice, but they never did anything this messed up before. My sister confronted Regina and all she said was, "You are a loser and losers deserve a crappy life. Deal with it." My sister went on to graduate as the class valedictorian and went to Cambridge in the UK for her undergraduate and graduated with highest honours and then went to Harvard Law. She worked for a few years at some big law firm but eventually started her own practice back in the area we grew up in with her now husband. One day, she gets a mother and her daughter into her office and asks about suing the landlord of the apartment complex the mother was living in. They said the premises have not been unkept, has hazardous living conditions, and repairs are rarely done, and when they are done, they're not done well. For example, when a water pipe burst, the plumber didn't replace any of the old pipes and instead just patched with adhesives like duct tape and Gorilla Tape because to fully repair the ordeal would take a few days, so the management company just patched it up. My sister goes on to find out that the management company is owned none other than by Regina's family, and that complex had been falling apart ever since Regina's father retired and Regina decided to take over despite not knowing how to run the company. Over the course of a few months, my sister found out that it was not just this one complex, but 3 out of the 4 complexes the company managed were in terrible condition, and my sister's firm was able to get about 60% of the residents to file for a class action lawsuit. The list of things that were messed up in these places was astronomical. The fire sprinkler system didn't work, a huge backlog of repairs needed to be done in the apartments, signs of mold were even sprouting in certain areas with more moisture, and rodent infestation. The only thing they didn't have were termites. On top of that, there were reports of multiple break-ins in the complexes, as the security contractors were no longer working for them. Everything was documented with pictures, police reports, and sworn witness statements from current and previous tenants. Contractors previously hired, previous employees, and expert witnesses. The case mounted against Regina's company was basically ironclad. My sister never forgot that rumor, and if there was even an opportune moment for her to get back at Regina, it would be now. So my sister made it her mission to get anything and everything out of Regina for wronging these people. Initially, Regina's attorney wanted to settle out of court, but since Regina was stubborn and also not too bright, she didn't want to settle and decided to fight back. As the defendant, Regina's claim was that all of the problems were caused by the plaintiffs and they were trying to fraud her. Case eventually went to trial, despite Regina's attorney wanting to settle out of court. On the first day of court, my sis was nervous about Regina recognizing her. However, it seemed like Regina didn't remember her at all. Throughout the trial, my sister's firm produced expert witness after expert witness about how all the damage to the property was caused by negligence and any repairs that were not done properly. Former employees testified how Regina cuts cost by reducing critical maintenance staff and expecting the leftover staff to take care of everything. When they couldn't keep up with the backlog, she fired the people and hired unqualified replacements. The only complex that was maintained well was the one she lived in, and she spared no expense to remodel her unit with new appliances and luxuries, and also had a bunch of her friends live there too, either discounted heavily or free. At the end of the trial, Regina was found guilty on all accounts and ordered to fix everything or the complexes will be shut down. The judge also ordered that no one was allowed to live there while the repairs were being made, so she had to pay for all the current tenants' relocation to hotels and the repairs for an entire month. There were over 300 residents. The costs for everything would cost Regina over $2 million, assuming they don't find more things wrong and need to extend the repairs. If she had just settled with the plaintiffs, in the beginning, it would have cost her less than 500 grand. Regina broke down outside of the courthouse and was screaming at her attorneys. When she caught sight of my sister, she ran over and started screaming obscenities at her. My sister put up a hand to quiet her and said to her face, "You are a loser, and losers deserve a crappy life. Deal with it," and walked away. Regina's face got bright red for a moment, and then the light bulb finally went off as she realized who my sister is. The same nerd girl she bullied and has now destroyed her life. Aftermath. Regina's dad had zero idea what was going on. After he retired, he moved out of the country to live abroad, and by the time he found out that the company he built was falling apart, it was a bit too late. He eventually came back to fire Regina and re-establish his company and hired the right people to run the company. Honestly, this sounds too good to be true, but I'm gonna say it is because I think that is amazing if it is, and props to that person for saying the exact same line, and yeah, that's amazing. Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like, and if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.